I'm pleased to say I'm joined by Deven Ghelani, Director of the Policy in Practice think tank, but also, and you'll correct me if I'm getting this wrong, Deven, one of the people who helped design the universal credit system, correct?
Yeah, correct,
Good,
Sheila.
good. Why don't we start there then? Because an awful lot of people are engaging with universal credit for the first time, or benefits at all for the first time, with different lives than those who typically would.
Yeah, there's been a huge jump in the number of people on universal credit. The number of people on job seekers, which includes universal credit, has more than doubled since the start of the pandemic. So it's gone up by 120%. Overall, I think universal credit's done a good job in getting money to those people. So it's been one of the few success stories for the government during this pandemic.
Tell me how it's been a success.
Just in the sense that if you're coming into contact, the legacy system could not have coped with the increase in numbers that we've seen since the start of the pandemic.
You mean, when you say legacy system, you mean what preceded it?
I mean, yeah, having to claim housing benefit, having to claim job seekers from two separate departments, you'd have to be going to twice as many places, you need twice as many staff to deal with that. And universal credit, to be honest, barely coped, but it did cope. And if you had to do that across local government, central government, and the tax credit system, I don't think it would have been possible. And it is working in the sense that people are getting paid their universal credit every month. So it's doing the job that it was designed to do. But there is more to be done, and you can see that from the announcements today. So you can see, certainly from others you've had on the programme, employers in particular saying, I'm not sure whether this is going to do enough for me. So it's great that we've got a scheme in place to replace the furlough scheme, but because that will stem the numbers of people kind of expected to jump off. But the Office for Budget Responsibility said that forecast at the end of furlough, they're expecting 10% of those people to lose their jobs in a best case scenario. And to be honest, with this scheme, I think maybe that's more of a middle case scenario, but it still feels about right. I think that you're still going to see a
lot of people, isn't it?
People lose their jobs.
That's a lot of people,
and they'll be coming into contact with the benefit system for the first time. What I would say to your listeners is that you can get universal credit even if you are still working, and particularly if you're getting less money. So if you are moved on to a part-time role through this new scheme, it might mean that you're now eligible for some additional support.
Are there areas of universal credit that should change to take in some of those 3 million who've been left out of in the cold completely? Because many of them have been calling me right from the very beginning, really, saying if this goes on much longer, I'm looking at the collapse of my entire working life and then my actual life.
Yeah, I think I was on the show at the outset talking about, and probably what this announcement today leaves out is anything for those groups that missed out the first time round. This is really a replacement for those that are getting support now. What's going to be in place next time? If you had savings above £16,000, you're not eligible for universal credit currently. The minimum income floor, as far as I can see, is going to be reintroduced, which means they're going to assume a level of earnings if you're self-employed on universal credit. If you've got no recourse to public funds, you are eligible for this the job support scheme, but you wouldn't be eligible for universal credit. So if your employer says no, you won't be eligible for universal credit. And students without support from their parents also aren't eligible for universal credit. So those are the four groups we've heard from. A huge number have come to us through Policy in Practice or our Better Off calculator who have been asking questions. Those are the four groups that really stand out where you could make a big difference. I think the other thing where there's
and by that you mean just change the policy, make them eligible.
Yeah, that's it's as simple as that. So ending the savings limit in universal credit would help a lot of those where their partner is earning and they're not. They'd be eligible for some kind of support. Similarly, for people with no recourse to public funds, there needs to be something in place to help them. I remember the Prime Minister struggled to answer that question, and they could do something about it.
Yes, because I'm glad you've reminded. Sorry, before you go on, I'm glad you reminded me of that group, because there you're talking about, for example, foreign students, people whose visa status here is valid now, but they haven't got any right to claim from the benefit system, and often they're in the hospitality sector, aren't they?
Yeah, and those sectors, that's how they've been getting by. And in a sense, the furlough scheme was good because they were eligible for that, and a lot of employers obviously took that up. But as employers have to make a bigger and bigger contribution, these are the groups that are going to lose out more because they can't access that additional support. One other big point, I think what's being lost here is the importance of the benefit system in boosting demand. So you do have measures in place that have made the benefit system a little bit more generous than it was previously. So I think firstly those measures need to be retained. So the extra £20 per week, for example, for people on universal credit. But it could do so much more. So in terms of expanding these measures, the biggest problem that the Chancellor is going to face, incredibly difficult with COVID restrictions still in place, but as hopefully we bring COVID under control, is going to be getting the economy back to similar levels of activity that we had before. And he did a great job with, I think, with the Help Out scheme. I thought that seemed to work. But with COVID still around, I'm not seeing. And I heard the pub landlord on your show earlier saying actually no, it's getting back to nail biting time for a huge number of businesses.
Because that change in hours of the 10 o'clock closure and on any night, but particularly weekend nights, it's a big deal for them, isn't it?
Yeah, and it makes sense because the first priority has got to be to control the pandemic. But it sort of they go together. You need to control the virus in order to be able to boost demand within the economy, because it isn't just a money problem. I think it is like a behavioural challenge. We're not supposed to go out. We're not supposed to be mingling. The economy shouldn't be back to normal while the virus is still out there. And I think that's one of the. In that time, the social security system and measures like those that the Chancellor's announced today, that's where they come into their own. And it isn't necessarily the best idea to, particularly with the benefit system, making it more generous would boost demand locally where that makes sense, but also protect people who are losing their jobs from the hospitality sector or from other sectors right now. And it's a really powerful tool that the government can do more with.
Can it cope if 3 million are unemployed by Christmas?
Like I say, the social security, if universal credit was going to fall over, it would have done so in the last wave. The numbers of people applying when I last came onto your show were absolutely phenomenal. I think, like I say, it's one of the few success stories for the government in that they did redeploy staff, get people onto universal credit, improve aspects of how it works.
Its moment has come, has it? In the worst circumstances, but its moment has come.
Yeah, and again, you see these problems in other countries where they are struggling to get money to people because their social security system hasn't been modernised or made fit for purpose. That doesn't mean there isn't room for universal credit still to improve, though, and I wouldn't want to kind of confuse those two. It's done the job, and it can handle more people, but that doesn't mean there aren't groups that are missing out that could be receiving that extra support from the government. That need it now more. This is what the social security system is for, Sheila, as you well know. It's for people where misfortune falls upon them through no fault of their own. Anyone can get sick, and particularly now, anyone can get sick. So, it's a really important part of the recovery that I think the government can invest more in.
Thank you very much. Good to talk to you again. Deven Ghelani, Director of the Policy in Practice think tank.